Hey everyone, just a quick reminder. Only about 25% of you watching are subscribed to the channel. If you're enjoying the content, hitting that subscribe button would really help the channel grow. And while you're at it, smash that like button too. It helps a ton, and lets me know you're enjoying the content. Thanks for being here, and let's dive into the story. Mike's night shift at UPS had always been a blend of monotony and dry humor. Every evening, as the fluorescent lights hummed overhead and the vast warehouse yawningly stretched before him, he exchanged wry banter with the lone coworker stationed at the far end, a distant voice crackling over the radio, equally fond of sarcastic quips about misplaced packages and oddly cheerful deliveries. It was on one such routine night, amid stacks of cardboard boxes and the steady rhythm of forklifts, that Mike's attention was caught by a battered, unmarked package wedged behind a row of oversized parcels. At first, he chuckled. Maybe this one's a special delivery from the other side, he joked, half expecting a prank from management. But, as he pried the sealed flaps open, his eyes widened in disbelief. Inside was not another routine order. Instead, nested in faded tissue was an ancient, leather-bound book. Its cover bore strange, weathered symbols that danced in the flickering light. The pages, yellowed by time, were inscribed with an indecipherable script alongside 4 clearly legible rules scrawled at the beginning. Mike's initial amusement morphed into incredulous wonder. He mused aloud. What? Do they want me to deliver souls now? His laughter echoed in the cavernous space, a brief respite from the isolation of the night. Yet as he flipped through the pages, he noticed the eerie juxtaposition of whimsical jokes scribbled in the margins alongside ominous warnings. The book exuded an unsettling aura, as if it had witnessed countless secrets hidden behind the mundane world of shipping and receiving. Though still cloaked in humor, a subtle shiver crept up his spine. Outside his immediate area, a distant clatter, almost like a mischievous ghost playing with loose packaging tape, made him pause. He shrugged it off as the settling of the old building or the erratic workings of an overburdened HVAC system. Still, every time he glanced over his shoulder, the shadows seemed to shift a little too deliberately, as if keeping time with the cryptic verses of the mysterious tome. That night, as Mike recorded the odd find in his logbook with a playful note about ancient shipping instructions, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the atmosphere of the warehouse. Even as he returned to his routine, scanning barcodes, maneuvering pallets, and exchanging light-hearted banter, the ancient book sat heavy in his duffel bag, a silent portent of what was to come. The blend of humor and unease was subtle, yet persistent, and as he closed the door to his break room later that night, the whispers of laughter and dread began to merge, setting the stage for an unforgettable, twisted night. In the dim light of an approaching midnight, Mike found himself alone in his immediate zone of the warehouse. The voice of his distant coworker was now a soft murmur over the intercom, leaving him with only his thoughts and the enigmatic book. With a mix of skepticism and curiosity, he began to read the 4 rules inscribed within the brittle pages. Trust no midnight package. Silence is survival. Obey the unseen delivery. Honor the forgotten. At first, Mike smirked, thinking they must be the remnants of some elaborate in-house joke, perhaps a forgotten prop from a past company event. Trust no midnight package, he repeated under his breath, imagining a package with a mischievous personality. Yet, as he slowly recited each rule, the jovial ambiance of the warehouse seemed to dim. The familiar hum of machinery was overlaid by an almost imperceptible susurrus, a chorus of whispered syllables that could have been mistaken for the creaks and groans of old metal. The very walls appeared to lean in, absorbing his muttered words. A chill draft, inexplicable and cold, drifted through the aisles, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decay. Boxes that had earlier been inert now seemed to rustle as if stirred by a spectral breeze. The playful banter of minutes before was replaced by a creeping realization that these were no ordinary office pranks. Every soft sound, the clinking of glass, the scrape of metal, took on a weighty significance. Determined to remain rational, Mike decided to test his wits against his mounting unease. He double-checked the package logs, looked for misfiled shipments, and even scanned the mysterious book with his phone's light, searching for hidden texts or secret messages in the faded script. But the more he probed, the more the rules seemed to resonate with a dark authority. "Obey the unseen delivery," he whispered, half in disbelief, as he passed a stack of boxes that now seemed to shimmer with a faint ghostly glow. Outside his immediate area, the distant hum of his coworker's voice provided a fragile tether to normalcy. Yet, Mike's growing suspicion was accompanied by the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate steps echoing in a place where none should be. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination or something more sinister moving among the aisles. The once humorous notion of a paranormal package now felt like a dire prophecy. With each passing minute, the warehouse transformed, from a mundane backdrop for late-night deliveries to a stage set for an ancient and malevolent ritual. In the silence that followed his reading, the weight of the rules pressed on him like an unseen hand. The night had taken a turn, and every shadow seemed to whisper of secrets best left undisturbed. Mike's initial laughter was replaced by a deep, resonant dread, one that promised the rules were not mere curiosities, but keys to unlocking a horror lurking in the forgotten corners of the UPS facility. Mike's heart pounded as he stepped deeper into the dark corridors of the warehouse. It was well past midnight now, and the familiar buzz of fluorescent lights had faded into a quiet that felt almost heavy. Every shadow seemed to twist on its own, moving in ways that defied logic. The ancient book in his bag, once a curious oddity, now felt like a dark weight, its presence pulsing with an energy that made his skin crawl. He clutched the book tightly, trying to remember the rules. Trust no midnight package. Silence is survival. Obey the unseen delivery, and honor the forgotten. The simple words repeated in his mind like a mantra, yet they offered little comfort. As he walked down a narrow aisle lined with towering stacks of boxes, a soft scraping sound caught his attention. It was low and steady, like something being dragged slowly across the concrete floor. Then a whisper came, barely audible over the hum of the old building, repeating his name. "Mike. Mike." In a tone that sent shivers down his spine. Stopping in his tracks, Mike strained his ears. The sound wasn't coming from any machine or the distant hum of his coworker's radio. It was closer, right behind him. His eyes darted to the dark corners of the aisle, searching for the source. For a moment, the lights flickered, and he thought he saw a pale, fleeting shape disappearing behind a stack of parcels. His heart thumped loudly, and his hand trembled as he reached again into his bag for the book. The pages had changed. New scribbles now appeared in simple, plain words. "Do not follow the sound." A surge of fear mixed with a desperate need to understand. Mike decided he needed to move, to put distance between himself and whatever was calling him. But the warehouse seemed to have changed. The once familiar aisles now felt like twisting tunnels filled with hidden dangers. Boxes shifted on their own, and the floor creaked under every uncertain step. With each movement, he felt as if invisible eyes were tracking him from the shadows. He paused at a cluttered desk in a forgotten corner. Scattered paperwork and old delivery logs lay there, yellowed with time. One log in particular caught his attention with a chilling handwritten note. "The forgotten are not lost. They wait." The simple, unsettling message sent a fresh wave of dread over him. Mike's mind raced. Had others before him experienced the same terror? Was he now caught in a trap far greater than a simple workplace oddity? The overhead lights began to stutter more frequently, throwing harsh, intermittent beams across the space. Each flash revealed more details. A box that moved when no one was near, a shadow that stretched too long, a dark corner that seemed to pulse with life. The soft, steady whisper grew louder, blending with the creaks and groans of the old building. It was as if the warehouse itself was alive and resentful, holding secrets it was desperate to share. Determined to get to a safer place, Mike turned toward the area where he had first found the mysterious package. But the path was no longer clear. The familiar route twisted into a maze of darkened aisles, each one filled with unsettling sounds and fleeting figures that vanished when he tried to focus on them. His mind churned with thoughts of the book's rules, especially "silence is survival." He knew he needed to remain quiet, but every sound amplified his fear. The air grew colder and a light mist began to form near the floor, blurring his vision. Each breath came out in a visible puff as he hurried along, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. In the distance, the faint sound of his coworker's voice on the radio was a reminder that he wasn't entirely alone, yet that voice now seemed remote, almost like a memory from another life. Every step felt like a test of his courage. Mike could feel the oppressive weight of the unknown pressing in on him. He could no longer tell if the sounds were real or the product of his mounting terror. Yet, one thing was certain. The warehouse had changed from a simple place of work to a living nightmare. The lights, the shadows, even the silence spoke of an ancient force stirring, one that had been hidden in the walls long before he ever clocked in. With the book as his only guide, Mike pushed forward, each moment stretching out in excruciating detail. The whispering grew into a chorus of voices, each one echoing a warning or a plea. The more he tried to rationalize the events, the more they defied explanation. It was clear now that the UPS warehouse was no longer just a building. It had become a battleground between the ordinary and the supernatural, and Mike was caught in the middle. As he reached the end of a long, dim corridor lined with rows of dusty packages, his resolve wavered. Every heartbeat reminded him of the growing dread within. The laughter and lightheartedness of earlier in the night had vanished completely, replaced by a profound fear of what lay hidden in the dark. With trembling hands and a mind full of desperate questions, Mike stepped into the unknown, the echoes of his footsteps mingling with the sinister sounds that now ruled the warehouse. In that moment, as the last vestiges of normalcy faded away, Mike knew that his struggle was just beginning. The night had fully embraced him, and every shadow, every whisper, was a reminder that survival now depended on following the ancient cryptic rules that promised no safety, only a thin line between life and a terror that lurked in every dark corner. Descent into the unseen. Mike could feel the weight of the night, both physical and supernatural, pressing down on him as he trudged deeper into the heart of the warehouse. The lights above flickered violently, casting a sickly yellow glow across the aisle. Every time they hummed back to life, the world felt a fraction more twisted, more alien. The warehouse, once a familiar maze of boxes and delivery stations, now seemed to be closing in on him, changing its layout in real time. The corridors stretched and swayed, unsure of their own structure, as though guided by something invisible, something ancient. "Obey the unseen delivery," Mike repeated to himself, hoping the rule would suddenly make sense. But the darkness surrounding him wasn't following any kind of script he could understand. As he moved, boxes shifted and rattled on their own, tiny movements that crept into his awareness like silent whispers. He couldn't deny it anymore. The rules weren't just absurd musings. They were warnings, living instructions born from something older than the company, older than the warehouse itself. His pulse quickened as a pale figure appeared at the edge of his vision. Just a glimpse, skin ashen, limbs unnaturally elongated, its face hidden beneath a mask of shadow. Before Mike could breathe, the figure vanished behind a stack of heavy packages. He stopped in his tracks, heart pounding in his throat. Had he seen it? Or was the terror beginning to tap into his mind? He wasn't sure anymore. The air grew colder still, and a thick fog began to snake along the ground, reducing his visibility to mere feet. The faint sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. Mimicking his own pace, the footsteps grew louder with every passing second, taunting him, refusing to belong to anyone he could see. This wasn't his co-worker. It wasn't even human. Mike had heard stories of things that haunted spaces like these, things that were somehow tied to forgotten corners of the world, tied to the ones who had walked before him. The book in his hand pulled at him, its pages now alive, flicking back open on their own despite his best attempts to keep them closed. Mike had no choice. He had to recite the rules, even if they only seemed to mock him as the night warped into something unrecognizable. His muttered voice sliced through the thickening air. Obey the unseen delivery. Honor the forgotten. Silence is survival. But the more he repeated the words, the more urgent the whispers became, shaping themselves like voiced pleas. Then a voice echoed in his ear, one so close it might have belonged to someone right behind him. "Mike," it called softly, "don't turn around." Frozen, Mike's breath stuck in his chest. He could feel the presence at his back, its breath warm, almost familiar, yet wrong. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to run, to flee, and yet the terrifying utterance of those damned rules held him rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the warehouse seemed to shudder. It wasn't a passing tremor, but a quaking force that sounded like the building itself had just realized his intrusion. The floor followed this ominous ripple, vibrating beneath his boots, and Mike knew he was no longer alone. Yet, the rules still beat within him. Trust no midnight package. The delivery wasn't just coming from the boxes, it was coming from within the walls. He couldn't understand it yet, couldn't grasp the full magnitude of what he was up against. But that didn't matter. Whatever held the warehouse in its grip was about to make its move, and Mike could feel it scraping at his skin with every breath. The walls closed a fraction tighter, and the shadows twisted into something far darker, pulling at his memory, reminding him of the old rule he'd already broken, honoring the forgotten. The ancient call demanded his attention, one that didn't care about the rules, one that knew all too well how to twist a man's mind into submission. With desperation hanging in the air, Mike's grip on the book tightened further. But now, even as he clung to his sanity, it felt like something was erasing him from the world, fading him out bit by bit. And deep down, Mike realized one thing. Whatever was happening in those walls, in those forgotten spaces, it was real. Truly, dangerously real. None of the rules prepared him for what was next. For 33 seconds, Mike felt trapped in a maze of corridors that seemed to shift and close in around him. The quiet was broken only by his own echoing footsteps and the soft, ghostly whispers that drifted from unseen corners. Every step felt heavy as he clutched the ancient book, its rules now his only guide in a nightmare that had become all too real. He remembered the rule, "Obey the unseen delivery," and wondered what it truly meant. A sudden gust of cold wind scattered loose papers on the floor, as if the warehouse itself was trying to warn him. Following the faint glow of an emergency light, Mike discovered a small, forgotten office. Dust covered old delivery logs and rusty machines, and in the center of the room lay a weathered table with strange symbols carved deep into its surface. With shaking hands, he set the book down and turned to a page that seemed to pulse with its own eerie light. The page instructed him to recite a passage to calm the restless forces of the building. With no other choice, Mike spoke the words aloud. His voice filled the empty room, mingling with the whispers until for a brief, breathless moment, everything fell silent. The temperature dropped sharply, and the symbols on the table began to glow with a pale, unsettling light. From the far end of the room, a shadow emerged, a tall, indistinct figure that seemed to float rather than walk. Each step it took creaked like old wood, drawing ever closer to Mike. Fear gripped him as he realized this was the delivery warned about, the unseen force brought forth by the recitation. Remembering, silence is survival, he fell mute, his body frozen in terror. The shadow hovered near him, its presence overwhelming. Then, in a low, raspy voice filled with sorrow and anger, it whispered, "Remember." That single word carried the weight of lost souls and forgotten tragedies, a command and a curse intertwined. The figure extended a hand as if offering a dark promise, a silent reminder of all those trapped within the warehouse's walls. As the shadow slowly receded into the darkness, leaving behind a heavy, almost unbearable silence, Mike felt a mix of relief and deep dread. He knew the terror was far from over. This encounter had changed him, marked him as one who had seen what lay hidden beyond normal sight. The ancient book, with its cryptic rules, was now his only hope for navigating the horrors that lay ahead. With trembling determination, Mike picked up the book again. Each step forward promised a battle against unseen forces, a fight to preserve his sanity in a place where the ordinary and the supernatural collided. The descent into darkness was complete, and as the line between reality and nightmare blurred, Mike braced himself for the ultimate horror waiting in the next corner of the UPS warehouse. Mike's pulse hammered as he followed a faint, pulsing light down a narrow corridor he'd never seen before. The ancient book's final rule echoed in his mind: honor the forgotten. With trembling resolve, he pushed open a creaking door to reveal a small, dust-choked room. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and memories. In the center of the room sat a weathered pedestal, holding a single aged package wrapped in faded paper. Its surface bore the same strange symbols as the book. Heart in his throat, Mike recalled the rules. Trust no midnight package. Silence is survival. Obey the unseen delivery. And now, honor the forgotten. The ghostly whispers he'd heard earlier swelled into a chorus that filled the room. Return what was taken, they pleaded softly. The forgotten must be remembered. With shaking fingers, Mike unwrapped the package. Nestled within was a small, ancient key, a token that seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly warmth. The spectral voices grew clearer, telling him of lost souls and forgotten deliveries, of histories hidden behind every box and label. Each whisper urged him to mend a long-overlooked injustice. Driven by both terror and duty, Mike clutched the key and recited the final incantation etched in the book's margins. As his voice quavered through the silence, the room trembled. One by one, ghostly figures materialized among the dusty shelves. Their eyes, filled with sorrow and gentle hope, met his. They reached out as if seeking an embrace, a silent thank you for finally remembering them. Slowly, the figures began to fade, leaving behind an eerie calm. The oppressive chill lifted, and the steady hum of the warehouse lights returned. Mike realized that by honoring the forgotten, he had restored balance to this haunted place. The ancient book's power dimmed, its mission complete. Stepping out into the main warehouse once more, Mike's fear was replaced by a bittersweet relief. Though the night remained dark, he now carried the quiet knowledge that he had given respect to the lost voices echoing in every neglected corner of the facility. The final delivery was made, and with it the assurance that even in the eerie shadows of a UPS warehouse, every forgotten soul could finally be remembered.